25 years after the BBC presenter Jill Dando was shot dead, the man convicted of her murder insists he can prove his innocence and wants Scotland Yard to reopen the investigation. Barry George was convicted of her murder in 2001, but he was freed from prison in 2008 after a second Old Bailey jury unanimously found him not guilty, meaning the shooting of the BBC newsreader outside her home in London in April 1999 remains one of the UK's most high-profile unsolved crimes. But Milorad Ulemek, a convicted Serbian assassin, was named this week as a possible suspect after a former police expert said he could not be ruled out as a mystery man recorded on CCTV at a train station close to Dando's home. For more on this, I'm joined in the studio by TalkTV correspondent Ollie Whitfield-Miocic. Good to see you, Oliver.
Good to see you, yes. It's a tragedy, isn't it? 25 years on since Jill Dando was murdered outside of
I've just got to say, I knew her well. She was my colleague at the BBC, and actually we met first kind of off air. We were. I think she was reporting on a holiday resort. Do you remember she used to present that holiday programme in Florida? And by sheer chance, I happened to be there, so we became friends before we were colleagues. And people who might not remember her because this was so long ago, 25 years ago, which is unbelievable to me. She was. I think she was kind of everyone's girl next door. She was kind of unfussy. She was very, very pretty, but not kind of consciously glamorous. She wasn't kind of a fashion leader. She wouldn't have been the influencer that so many other female presenters are. She was very kind of wholesome, down to earth, professional, nice, kind, little bit jolly hockey sticks, that kind of a person. The kind of person that you would have thought could not possibly have irritated, upset or annoyed anyone on earth. She was everybody's girl next door, and it was an unbearable shock to everyone when this happened. So I just want to set the context. And she was somebody very, very popular on TV. I mean, she was presenting more and more and more programmes because she did them in such a nice way. She was nice. She was, you know, she was clued up. She'd done her homework.
She did everything.
She was great. She was just a very good presenter and a very nice person.
Yeah, she really was. And so the police were accused of botching the whole investigation when it first happened because they looked into 1,300 suspects and the pressure was really mounting on them to find out who did it. The fact that 25 years on we still aren't any closer is absolutely insane for a lot of people. How is it that we still don't know who murdered Jill Dando? And so the police settled on an autistic man called Barry George who lived 500 metres down the road from Jill Dando. Now, they said because he had a little bit of gunshot residue on the inside of his pocket, that meant that he was the man who did it. He was convicted 2 years after she was murdered, but 7 years later, that was overturned by a separate trial that was held at the Old Bailey. Now he wants to prove his innocence and he wants to get his case to the Supreme Court to show that there's no way it could have been him because the assassin was left-handed, he was right-handed. He says that there's no way he could have shot Jill, gone home, got changed, and then gone to a disability advice centre, all in the time frame of 20 minutes. And so they're hoping that they will finally be able to not only clear his name, but to get the compensation that he feels he is rightfully owed after 7 years of being incarcerated for a crime that he did not commit. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because in the days after Jill was murdered, the BBC receives a phone call saying that her murder was revenge for a NATO attack on a television station in Belgrade in Serbia, in which 17 people died. And it just so happened that Jill Dando, in the weeks before, had done a TV fundraising programme which raised something to the tune of £54 million for Kosovans who were fleeing from Serbia. So there is a thought that potentially she might have been targeted by Serbia. So now the thought is that potentially Milorad Ulemek, who is a convicted Serbian assassin who used to work for the former Yugoslav president Slobodan Milosevic and who has killed not only a Serbian prime minister and a Serbian president, there is thoughts from some police experts that the man who was seen in a grainy CCTV image could be the Serbian assassin, and the assassin is not saying anything. So the mystery continues. Nobody is any closer to knowing. And just imagine the heartache that this is not only for Jill's family, but for colleagues like you. Jenny Bond, she was a close colleague, and she remembers hearing about it in the newsroom and then having to break the news that evening. If you watch that documentary, you can tell the heartache.
Absolutely. I presented a tribute sort of show to her, just kind of paying respects to her on the BBC a few days after. I mean, people were in absolute floods of tears because she was such a nice person. She really was the kind of person that would be head girl, form prefect, you know, look after you if you were new, that kind of person. I'm not saying it just because she's no longer with us. I'm really not. That is what she was like. Very unaffected, very sort of decent, you know, just a thoroughly upright, respectable kind of person. And also, you know, some people who get famous think they're all that and think they're really something special and, you know, go around a bit as if, you know, don't look at me, don't talk to me, I'm really something rather elevated and marvellous. She wasn't that. She wasn't that at all. She was absolutely take her shoes off, you know, get involved. She loved Cliff Richard. He was her absolute idol. I went to a party for her at the BBC when she was leaving one programme to go to a new one, and Cliff Richard made a surprise appearance. Honestly, she looked like a delighted 7-year-old. She was so excited to see Cliff Richard. It was really, really lovely. She was a very kind of, I think the word is unspoiled. You know, she wasn't a kind of celebrity, diva-y person at all. So what you saw on television, this very natural, very sort of unassuming, very smiling, nice person. That's what she was really like when I met her, you know, in real life before I ever got to know her as a colleague. Just a very nice person. So, you know, people are bereft at her loss. And, you know, had she lived, you know, you could only have seen her career go from strength to strength to strength. And you can imagine her presenting more and more and more programmes because she did it in such a delightful way. You know, very, very, anything you watched with her, you thought, oh, yeah, I can trust that. That looks nice. That's a good thing to watch. It made you feel reassured and comfortable, and you know she had that particular personality that not many people really have. She's a really, really delightful person. So where is this fellow, this assassin?
He's still in Serbia.
He's in Serbia.
He's in Serbia, but his lawyer says he will not be commenting. He won't be making any sort of statement. So you can imagine we're not probably going to get anything from this. The detectives at Scotland Yard say, of course, it is still an open investigation, but the length of time that has gone on, unless we hear something, unless there is some new evidence that definitively proves who it is. Because we went through that first trial with Barry George. Yes. He was incarcerated for 7 years. The last thing the police want now is to get somebody else on the hook, put them behind bars, and then the whole thing unravels again.
I think when it happened 25 years ago, we were just getting it through our heads in this country, the importance and the prevalence of CCTV cameras. I think before that, it hadn't really registered. You know, people didn't really have this feeling that there was surveillance all over the place, and you know, you could actually be tracked through your day. You'd be seen walking into a shop. You'd be seen parking your car. If you went on the tube, you could be captured on camera doing that. I didn't think people quite got that, and maybe that's because there weren't as many then, and it was relatively new as a kind of technological innovation. But when Jill Dando was killed, we saw her day unfold. I think we saw her go to the dry cleaners. We saw her go to a different shop. We saw kind of what she was doing.
Leaving the house, her leaving the house. There's a whole timeline.
That's right. Her fiancé, Alan Farthing. She had made him breakfast. She had stayed in his house, I think in Chiswick overnight, which she spent a lot of time there. They were going to get married. They were engaged. And he was a gynecologist. He still is, a very well-known and handsome and, you know, likeable kind of doctor, the sort of doctor that you might see in a film or in a bit like her, you know, they looked like, almost like as if they'd been sort of cut out of perfection models, you know. Yeah. And she just made his breakfast, and she just went about having a normal morning just like anybody else. And then suddenly the CCTV just seems to evaporate, and I think that was what was so bizarre at the time.
Yeah, it's just the mystery on mystery on mystery, no answers, not knowing. Yes, it's terrible.
Yes, and so this is 25 years since we lost her, and I think this is 25 years to the exact day, isn't it? Yeah. So it's really, I suppose, a moment to just express our condolences still, and to say that, as you can see from my warm tribute to Jill Dando, she's very fondly remembered. And